Throughout human history, our greatest battles haven't always been against each other. Sometimes our most fearsome adversaries have come from the natural world itself. When civilization meets wilderness, when desperation drives instinct, and when the balance of nature collapses, humans have found themselves face to face with one of Earth's most formidable predators, the wolf. This is the story of man against wolf, a conflict written in blood across centuries, where survival wasn't guaranteed, and where the line between hunter and hunted could shift in an instant. To understand these deadly encounters, we must first understand the wolf itself. Wolves rank among Earth's most adaptable and intelligent predators. Despite centuries of human expansion and systematic extermination campaigns, these remarkable canines still roam vast territories across the Northern Hemisphere, from the frozen tundra of Siberia to the forests of North America and the mountains of Europe. Like humanity, wolves succeed through intelligence, social structure, and adaptability. They exist in remarkable variety, different sizes, behaviors, and hunting strategies shaped by their environments. The wolves of the far north can reach truly impressive dimensions, 7 feet in length, weighing up to 180 pounds, with powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. The social structure of wolf packs mirrors human families in surprising ways. They operate in hierarchical groups, typically 6 to 8 individuals, led by an alpha pair. They care for their young with remarkable dedication, tend to their injured, and teach their offspring survival skills through patient demonstration. This social complexity demands intelligence, and wolves possess it in abundance. Territory defines wolf existence. A typical wolf pack claims roughly 50 square miles as their domain, which they patrol relentlessly and defend with ferocious determination against rival packs. In times of plenty, this territory provides everything they need. But when disaster strikes, when brutal winters decimate prey populations, or when human activity disrupts the ecological balance, these territories can expand dramatically, sometimes exceeding 1,000 square miles as desperate packs search for food. Their hunting capabilities are extraordinary. A wolf's sense of smell can detect prey from nearly 2 miles away. They can travel 30 miles in a single day, tracking their quarry with relentless patience. Their preferred prey includes large ungulates, elk, caribou, moose, and wild boar. When they hunt, they employ sophisticated pack tactics, surrounding, isolating, and coordinating their attacks with remarkable precision. The killing method is brutally efficient. Wolves target the legs, flanks, and face of larger prey, using their powerful jaws to inflict crippling damage. Their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, more than double what's needed to crush a human skull. Once the prey falls, wolves often begin feeding before death occurs, consuming the nutrient-rich organs first. Under normal circumstances, wolves avoid humans. Evolution has taught them that humanity means danger. But normal circumstances don't always prevail. When environmental catastrophe combines with human conflict, when prey vanishes and starvation looms, the wolf's survival instinct overrides its learned caution. And in these rare but terrifying moments, humans become prey. The relationship between wolves and humans stretches back to the dawn of our species. Some scientists believe we began domesticating wolves as much as 40,000 years ago, eventually creating the dogs we know today. But this partnership came at a cost paid by countless humans who fell victim to their wild cousins. Historical records across Europe and Asia document centuries of wolf attacks. France, with its meticulous record-keeping, reveals a staggering toll. Hundreds of fatal wolf attacks occurred between the 15th and 19th centuries. These weren't isolated incidents, they were a persistent threat that shaped culture, folklore, and daily life. The fairy tales we grew up with, Little Red Riding Hood, Peter and the Wolf weren't mere entertainment. They were warnings, lessons taught to children about very real dangers lurking beyond the village walls. These stories survived because the threat was genuine and ever-present. Modern research has revealed patterns in these historical attacks. They cluster around specific conditions: unusually harsh winters, warfare that drove men from their homes, natural disasters that disrupted prey populations. When multiple catastrophes converged, wolf behavior could transform dramatically. Normally, rival wolf packs maintain strict territorial boundaries, avoiding and attacking each other on sight. But starvation changes everything. Desperate times create what researchers call super packs, temporary alliances between normally hostile groups that can swell to hundreds of individuals. These massive aggregations, driven by collective desperation, become extraordinarily dangerous. There's another phenomenon documented in scientific literature: surplus killing. When wolves encounter abundant, easily accessible prey after extended starvation, they sometimes kill far more than they can eat, leaving mutilated carcasses behind. This behavior, observed primarily during severe winters with deep snow, suggests a feeding frenzy triggered by extreme deprivation. Russia has particularly extensive documentation of wolf attacks, including continuing into modern times. As recently as 2021, a Russian farmer fought off a wolf bare-handed while protecting his livestock, ultimately strangling the animal to death. Such incidents remain more common in Russia than elsewhere, partly because vast wilderness areas still harbor substantial wolf populations. Researchers studying Russian wolf attacks note a crucial factor: population control. In regions where humans actively hunt wolves, keeping populations in check, attacks remain rare. But when human populations decline, during wars, famines, or economic collapse, wolf numbers surge and conflict intensifies. The historical record teaches us that humanity's dominance over nature is never guaranteed. It must be actively maintained. When we abandon our settlements, when our defenses weaken, when nature reclaims what we've taken, the predators return. Winter descended on Paris in 1438 with unprecedented brutality. The city, already ravaged by decades of the Hundred Years' War, faced a perfect storm of catastrophes. The conflict with England had drained resources and manpower. A recent outbreak of bubonic plague swept through crowded streets. Food supplies dwindled as trade routes remained dangerous and unreliable. And now, the coldest winter in recorded history gripped the city in ice. Climate research analyzing medieval records has confirmed that the 1430s represented the coldest decade of the entire millennium, with 1438 marking the peak of this frozen nightmare. Snow accumulated in drifts higher than a man's head, the Seine froze solid, and in the forests surrounding Paris, death moved on four legs. For years, Parisians had known about the massive, reddish wolf that haunted the countryside. Farmers reported sightings of an enormous male, larger than any wolf in living memory, leading a sizable pack. They called him Courtaud, a name meaning the short-tailed one, though no one could quite remember how he'd earned it. As winter's grip tightened, the wolves grew desperate. Their natural prey, deer, boar, smaller game, had either fled the region or starved. The packs began venturing closer to human settlements, attacking livestock with increasing boldness. But soon, even the farm animals were gone, slaughtered or brought within city walls for protection. Then the wolves discovered a new food source. Paris had a grim problem. Plague victims needed disposal, but the frozen ground couldn't be dug for proper burial. The solution seemed practical at the time. Throw the corpses over the city walls. Let nature deal with them. Perhaps, some optimists suggested, the diseased flesh might even poison the wolves and solve both problems at once. The wolves ate every body thrown to them, But plague doesn't transfer easily to canines, and the animals only grew more fixated on human flesh. Attacks on travelers increased. Anyone caught outside the walls after dark faced almost certain death. Small groups of villagers fleeing the countryside for the city's safety would vanish without trace, nothing remaining but blood-stained snow and scattered belongings. The wolves no longer feared humans, they hunted them. The city guards reinforced their vigilance, but Paris was vast, and the walls had weaknesses. Where the Seine entered the city, a gap existed beneath the portcullis, usually filled with flowing water, but now frozen solid. It was barely 3 feet high, too small for a horse or cart, generally ignored as a security risk. The wolves found it. On a bitter January evening, as church bells rang for vespers, Courtaud led his pack through the gap and into Paris itself. They moved through empty streets like ghosts, their paws silent on packed snow. The residents, huddled indoors against the cold, had no warning. The wolves emerged into the square before Notre Dame Cathedral just as evening services concluded. 40 priests and clergymen filed out into the torchlit plaza, conversing quietly, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The attack was swift and merciless. Witnesses watching from windows described a scene of absolute horror. The wolves moved with coordinated precision, cutting off escape routes, dragging down victims before they could reach safety. The clergymen, unarmed and unprepared, had no chance. Their screams echoed off the cathedral stones, bringing residents rushing to windows, but no one dared venture outside to help. In less than 20 minutes, 40 men lay dead in the snow. The wolves fed until gorged, then vanished back through the river gate before organized resistance could form. Not a single wolf had been killed or even injured. The psychological impact was devastating. If wolves could penetrate the heart of Paris itself and slaughter men before the city's greatest cathedral, nowhere was safe. Panic spread faster than the plague. Some citizens fled despite the winter cold. Others refused to leave their homes even in daylight. The captain of the city guard, a veteran soldier named Hugues de Bataille, requested emergency authority from the king. His plan was audacious: turn the wolves' courage against them. For 2 weeks, strict orders were enforced. No one could leave the city. No garbage or waste was thrown over the walls. Instead, everything was collected in the Notre Dame square. Refuse, scraps, anything that might carry scent. Livestock scheduled for slaughter were butchered in the square, their blood soaking into the frozen ground. Entrails were dragged from the river gate, across the ice, through the streets, creating a scent trail leading directly to the bait. Meanwhile, carpenters modified the square. The side street entrances were barricaded with heavy timber. The main entrance remained open, but a massive gate was constructed overhead, suspended on ropes that could be cut from high windows. Iron barriers were positioned to prevent escape back toward the river. The square became a trap. For days, nothing happened. A few wolves investigated cautiously, but retreated. The butchered cattle in the square remained untouched. De Bataille ordered more animals slaughtered, more blood spilled. The entire strategy hinged on the wolves' desperation overcoming their caution. On the 10th day, with 20 more cattle freshly killed and the square reeking of blood and offal, the wolves came. It was mid-morning when lookouts spotted them, not a dozen or 2 dozen, but hundreds emerging from the river gate in a seemingly endless stream. And at their head, unmistakable in size and color, came Courtaud himself. The wolves flooded into the square and began feeding frenetically. When the last of the pack had entered, de Bataille gave the signal. Ropes were cut and the gate crashed down, sealing the wolves inside. What followed was less a battle than a massacre. Archers positioned on rooftops, walls, and upper windows began loosing arrows into the packed mass of wolves below. The animals, trapped and panicked, had nowhere to flee. Some tried to scale the walls, others turned on each other in confusion. Within an hour, hundreds lay dead or dying. But wolves are remarkably resilient. Many, despite carrying multiple arrows, continued to move and fight. De Bataille ordered the city's hunting dogs released into the square, massive hounds bred for hunting boar and bear. The confined space erupted into chaos. Dogs and wolves tore at each other with savage intensity. The wolves, larger and more experienced killers, took a terrible toll on the hounds, but the dogs kept coming, and gradually the wolf numbers dwindled. Through it all, Courtaud survived. The great red wolf fought with terrifying ferocity, killing dog after dog, somehow avoiding the worst of the arrow volleys. He held the center of the square near the fountain, surrounded by a defensive circle of the pack's remaining survivors. De Bataille himself descended into the square with a squad of experienced soldiers armed with boar spears, long polearms designed to hold off charging animals. The final wolves fought with desperate courage, wounding several men severely before being brought down. At last, only Courtaud remained. The massive wolf, bloodied and bristling with arrows, stood alone among the corpses of his pack. De Bataille advanced with his spear lowered. The historical accounts, embellished though they may be, describe the final confrontation as almost ritualistic. The captain and the wolf, both wounded, both exhausted, circled each other in the blood-soaked square. When Courtaud lunged, de Bataille braced his spear, the point taking the wolf through the chest, but his momentum carried him forward along the shaft, his jaws closing on the captain's throat as the blade pierced his heart. Both fell together. By the time guards reached them, both were dead. The bells of Notre Dame rang out in celebration. 300 wolves were counted among the dead, an almost incomprehensible number that speaks to both the desperation of the animals and the severity of that terrible winter. The corpses were burned in great pyres outside the city walls, the smoke visible for miles. Whether every detail is accurate, we cannot know for certain. Medieval accounts often embellish, turning men into heroes and beasts into monsters. But the core truth remains. In the winter of 1438, Paris was besieged not by English armies, but by starving wolves, and hundreds of those animals died in a desperate gambit to feed themselves within the city's walls. The people of Paris survived, but they never forgot. The story of Courtaud entered local legend, a reminder that civilization's boundary is thinner than we imagine, and that when nature turns against us, survival is never guaranteed. Nearly 5 centuries would pass before wolves would threaten humans on such a scale again. But when that moment came, it arrived amid an even greater human catastrophe, the First World War. In the winter of 1917, the Eastern Front stretched across hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness. Russian and German soldiers faced each other across trenches and foxholes, locked in brutal combat. That winter proved exceptionally harsh, one of the coldest of the entire 20th century, with temperatures plunging well below zero. But both armies soon discovered they shared a common enemy. Reports began filtering back from the front lines, reports that commanders initially dismissed as exhaustion-induced hallucinations or exaggerations. Soldiers described enormous wolves, far larger than any they'd seen before, prowling near the trenches. Sentries posted at night reported glowing eyes in the darkness beyond the wire, and pack howls that grew closer each evening. Then, men started disappearing. Soldiers sent on patrol duty failed to return. Bodies were discovered torn apart in no man's land, victims not of artillery or machine guns, but of massive jaws and tearing claws. Medical officers examined the wounds and confirmed what frontline troops already knew: wolves were hunting them. The situation grew so dire that an extraordinary event occurred, an informal truce. Russian and German forces, locked in vicious combat for months, temporarily ceased hostilities to deal with the wolf packs. Soldiers from both sides coordinated hunting parties, combining their forces to track and kill the predators. Contemporary accounts describe super packs numbering in the hundreds, emboldened by the abundance of corpses in no man's land and driven by the collapse of their normal prey populations. The war had devastated the countryside, driving away or killing the deer and other animals the wolves normally hunted. Human dead and wounded became substitute prey. The wolves demonstrated shocking fearlessness, entering trenches to drag away wounded men, attacking supply columns, and even pursuing retreating soldiers across open ground. Both armies suffered casualties not from enemy action, but from wolf attacks, a bizarre footnote in a war already notorious for its horror. Eventually, concerted hunting efforts reduced the wolf populations, and the temporary truce ended. The soldiers returned to killing each other instead of the wolves. But those who survived never forgot the winter when they faced predators older than human warfare, driven by hungers older than human conflict. The incident demonstrates that even in the 20th century, with modern weapons and technology, wolves posed a legitimate threat when the right conditions aligned. When war disrupted ecosystems, when harsh weather decimated prey populations, when human dead and wounded became substitute prey, the predators returned, just as they had in medieval Paris. The relationship between humans and wolves remains complex and evolving. Today, wolf populations in most regions are carefully managed, their numbers controlled through hunting and conservation programs that balance ecological needs with human safety. Fatal wolf attacks in developed nations have become extremely rare, but the potential still exists. As recently as the 21st century, wolf attacks continue to occur in rural Russia, India, and other regions where humans and wolves still compete for territory. Climate change, war, and natural disasters can still create the conditions that drove historical conflicts. The lessons of the past remain relevant. These stories remind us that humanity's dominance over nature is neither absolute nor permanent. We're successful not because we're stronger or fiercer than natural predators, but because we're organized, intelligent, and adaptable. When those advantages fail, when our societies collapse, when our defenses weaken, when nature's balance shifts, the predators are still there, waiting. The wolves of Paris and the Eastern Front weren't monsters. They were starving animals driven by the most basic imperative of all: survive. In that respect, they were no different from the humans they attacked. Both species were fighting for existence in impossible conditions. Both did what they had to do. Understanding this history isn't about demonizing wolves or romanticizing their extinction. It's about recognizing that our relationship with the natural world requires constant vigilance, respect, and management. The wolves aren't gone, they're simply controlled, and if that control ever lapses, history suggests they'll remember what humans taste like.